Jason. Thanks for listening to The Slippery Slope. I've been away for a week. Did a couple of days in the northern section of Queensland around the Whitsundays, and it's great to get away. I tell you, very good to get away, get out of the city, out of the rut of the city. And I had a week of not reading the news, not watching the news, I don't think I might have turned TV on once. That was about it. It was just to watch an entertainment show. It wasn't even the news at all. But so I'm back in it, back in Brisbane, looking at the news. It's the same stuff. It's all coronavirus, all COVID-19. I think New South Wales is just being obliterated by it, by the looks of it. Who knows? And Victoria's arguing with itself again. And I do see that the opposition leadership has changed in Victoria. So I have to keep an eye on that situation and see what's going to happen there. But hey, I do have a couple of things I want to go through. So this first article, it's from Sky News. It is about vaccination. I'm sorry, but you have to talk about it at the moment, don't you? So this one from Sky News: only the vaccinated to be granted freedoms upon reaching inoculation targets. Now it's talking about New South Wales. So New South Wales Premier Gladys Berejiklian has maintained her position that only the vaccinated will be able to enjoy the freedoms which come when the state reaches 70% double dose targets. It's very kind of her, isn't it? Isn't it funny how we fall straight back into segregating people? We fight for years not to have segregation. This comes along, you've got no more choice, and we're going to segregate you if you don't agree with what we're telling you. Anyway, I'll go on for this article. Berejiklian said this is due to a risk of hospitals being overwhelmed as a result of living with the Delta variant. So it's not even about getting the virus at this point. It's about protecting hospitals from doing what hospitals are supposed to be doing, and that's looking after sick people. So hospitals can't get overwhelmed. We know double dose vaccination. This is what she's saying. We know. I hate it when people start a sentence with "we know." We now know, because it usually means they don't know. Anyway, going on. She says, we know double dose vaccination is an enormous protection against hospitalization, Ms. Berejiklian said. We are really doing well, and the best thing we can do for our wonderful staff and for our loved ones is to get vaccinated. Follow the health orders, and that is why they have been very strict. That is why at 70% double dose, only those who are vaccinated will be able to enjoy the freedom that feet brings, because there is still a risk of not overwhelming the hospital system, and that is what living with Delta means. So now if you choose not to be vaccinated, it's only the double dose, and that's the only way that you're going to get freedom to just live a normal life in this country. That's a weird way to go. That is a weird way for a supposedly free country. Now, just want to touch on a few points from this, okay? She says we know double dose vaccination is an enormous protection against hospitalization, okay? And she says we're doing really well. This line here: the best thing we can do for our wonderful staff and for our loved ones is to get vaccinated. Now, I've got to tell you, my issue with all this get vaccinated for your friends, help protect the community. We're seeing in other nations, and I'm going to talk about this, I'm going to bring up some other articles, but we're seeing in other nations and in Australia, people who are fully vaccinated, they'll still get COVID-19, they'll still get the Delta variant, whatever it is, after being fully vaccinated. And they will still pass on COVID-19, especially the Delta variant, after they're vaccinated. Vaccination will help prevent the severity of COVID-19. and will help you get a less severe bout of COVID-19. It doesn't stop you from getting COVID-19, and it does not stop you from spreading it on to others, even though you're vaccinated. So if you go down that line, and this isn't my opinion, this is what we've been told in the media by doctors, okay? And we see it happen in other nations. We've seen it in this country. People get vaccinated, they still get COVID, especially Delta, and they will end up passing it on. So you're the only one. Once you get vaccinated, the only protection it's really giving you is to yourself. It's not protecting anyone else, because you still pass it on anyway. And this brings me to my point. Why are we forcing people? Why are we now mandating that people have to get vaccinated? Okay? We're mandating vaccinations. It's people's right to choose. There was always this saying getting around, and it was all the women that were saying, and they're allowed to say, my body, my choice. But apparently when it comes to vaccination now, it's not your body and it's not your choice. Even though a vaccination is really only protecting you. Okay, if you're an elderly person, you should get vaccinated because it will protect you. If you're someone with other complications, other health issues, well, then you need to talk to your doctor. And if it's right for you, well, then you can choose and you will get the vaccination, because the vaccination will protect you. It's not going to protect your neighbours, but these politicians talk as if the vaccination will magically protect everyone else around you. It only helps you, and even then, it's only limited. But I want to go through some things that are happening overseas, especially in the nation of Israel. Now, Israel was one of the first countries to have a high vaccination rate. I believe it was well into 70% very early on. Now, if you go in, just do a cursory Google search for yourself, Israel COVID-19 issues, okay, and it'll all come up. So I'll read this article here, and it's from Al Jazeera, 23rd of August. So a couple of about 2 weeks ago. It's talking about, as of August 20, so green passes are required to enter restaurants, public pools, museums, and other public places besides parks. This pass is issued to people who have received 2 vaccine doses or who have recovered from coronavirus. So this is all in Israel. Now, so that's what they're doing over there. But the trouble is they've currently got an outbreak happening in Israel, even though a vast majority have had 2-dose vaccination. Not only that, in part of this article, I'll keep reading. Israel was one of the first countries to vaccinate the majority of its population, and by March 2021, most Israelis were already putting COVID-19 behind them. By June, the mandatory mask requirement was completely dropped, and the only restrictions that remained concerned the entry and exit from the country. So now, the rate of infection has risen to 5.4%, and Prime Minister Naftali Bennett has said he will take every action possible to lower the rate and avoid going to a 4th lockdown. So health experts are saying there are 2 main reasons the Delta variant hit Israel so hard. For one, Israelis were flouting the mask requirements, and police weren't handing out fines, and that's part of the reason apparently. Now, and the other reason given for the high rate of infection, this line is very important. The other reason given for the high rate of infection is that most Israelis were vaccinated with the Pfizer vaccine, which data shows is less effective than the Moderna jab against the virus. So now in Australia, we only have the AstraZeneca and the Pfizer vaccine. They're the only 2 that we have at the moment. And yet this article apparently is saying, okay, that Pfizer vaccine, the data shows, is less effective than the Moderna. So this is the second reason that they're giving, besides not wearing masks. They're saying, well, Pfizer's not as effective as it should be. Pfizer's the only other vaccine that we've got other than AstraZeneca. It goes on to say in this article, it's true that Moderna has better protected people from infections, but the two vaccines were almost equivalent in effectiveness against severe disease, said Professor Cyril Cohen, Vice Dean of Life Sciences at Bar-Ilan University. So now, another important thing to remember about what's happened in Israel, they've actually been giving out booster shots, and they are looking at giving out a fourth booster shot. A second. So it's a fourth shot, a second booster. It's amazing that they're looking at doing a fourth shot, so a second lot, a second booster on top of the two original cases, and they're still looking at going into another lockdown. Now, I'm bringing all this up to wrap back up to what's happening in Australia. Australia is calling for mandatory vaccines, and yet we see in a country like Israel, where they have a vast majority of people have been vaccinated, and then a vast majority have had the booster shot, and yet they're still having another outbreak. They're still having these things happen, people hospitalized, and they're looking at a fourth booster. And this is all in under 12 months. So under 12 months. So, last year I got my flu vaccine, but they didn't want me to get another flu vaccine, another 2 shots throughout the year. The vaccine is supposed to last and hold me out for another 12 months. But apparently COVID, you might have to get four different shots in 1 year. So I bring it back again. Why are they making it mandatory when they don't understand what the true benefits are? When they don't, people like Berejiklian say, we now know, but you don't know, Gladys, you don't know. People need to have the choice. They need to be able to be given the choice. You can't make it mandatory. This is not going to end well. I don't believe it's going to end well for our nation. That's just my opinion. I am pro-choice when it comes to vaccination. Thanks for listening to The Slippery Slope.